Welcome to the Migrant Resource Centre, Northwest Region Incorporated Diversity and Disability YouTube channel. Your Life, Your Voice program, where self-advocates and professionals in the disability sector are interviewed.
The Diversity and Disability Project would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we work and live and recognise their continued connection to land, water and community. We pay respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Nothing about us without us. We pay respects to all self-advocates who have worked hard over the years and still working tirelessly for their rights, supporting others with disabilities and human rights for all.
This channel is for people with disabilities who aspire to seek self-advocacy role models to inspire change in their everyday lives. Nothing about us without us. Choice and control are central themes. Every interview is as unique as you and I.
And it has our fundamental universal human rights ethos of respect for persons with disabilities, having their views heard and acknowledged. After all, it's all in the name. Your life, your voice.
Be the voice of change in your life.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of Your Life, Your Voice. My name is Julie and Larissa. I'd like to welcome my co-host, Lara. Hi Lara, how are you doing?
Hi Julie, great to be here, and I believe it's a happy birthday wishes to you. Congratulations on another year.
Thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that, Lara, but thank you very much.
I was saving it up to be on air. You thought I didn't know, but I did. It's great to be here. I'm coming today from the lands of the Bunurong people, and I pay my respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge this land has never been ceded. This might be, as some of you may or may not know, I'm actually have an exhibition on at the moment, which is at the Sunshine Art Spaces Gallery, and it's rather a lot of work, so I am teetering on the edge of a bit of collapse, I think. So I'm going to be taking a break from co-hosting this great little program we have here, and we've got a new co-host coming in a fortnight, which I think we're going to keep it a secret as to who it is, Julie.
I think that the secret is out already, because I think I mentioned it last programming.
Yeah, we did.
Yes, so we're going to have Anthony Racco, who is a colleague of ours and a steering committee member of Diversity and Disability, a very interesting guy, so I'm looking forward to co-hosting with Anthony.
Yes, I'm looking forward to watching and taking a bit of a break. But for this last show that I'll be here with you for a little while, I'm very happy to introduce you to Ralp Kaleb, or Raphael Kaleb. Actually, Raphael, how do you prefer to be called?
Oh, listen, my name is Ralp, the Beurologist, Kaleb.
Knew I'd get it wrong.
It's just kind of like Ralp is much easier for people to remember. I prefer it.
Yeah, good. Well, thanks for coming along this morning. Do you want to just do a quick bio, bit of an introduction about yourself, so we've got somewhere to start?
Yeah, sure. Look, as I said, my name is Ralp, the Beurologist. I'll get rid of the difficult part because people always ask me, what is a beurologist? As I was chatting to Julie beforehand, the beurologist is my way of butchering the English language to make a word that I believed suited my personality, my ideas, and my thoughts. Essentially, the beurologist is the world expert on every subject you can think of, and they have no formal qualifications. In other words, it's pretty much like I would describe the usual male. They know absolutely everything, And every male aspires to be like the Beurologist, a smart ass. And every female knows a Beurologist from somewhere. That's pretty straightforward. Let's put it in disability terms, though, that this is really about disability culture, disability pride. Part of my journey with disability started a long decades ago. And I originally did meet Larissa at a course. It was called Leadership Plus. And
back in 2006.
Well, that's quite right. And that's another decade ago. And I was encouraged to apply for Leadership Plus through an organisation I was doing volunteer work at, and I had never considered myself either a formal leader or informal leader. And I had no idea why they asked me to apply for it. Nonetheless, I did, and I was accepted into it. And that changed my thoughts about what I would do. From that, I joined an organisation called Grit Media because it's disability media, essentially, or providing a platform for people with a disability to get media experience. And I did an audition, and the producer gave me a call and said, "We can't give you a start. However, I think that you've got a very good voice for radio, and I've organised you to go to 3CR if you're interested and see what you think of hosting The Boldness, which is a disability current affairs program on 3CR." And I'd never done radio before. And that was back in 2007. And I was doing a lot of writing, a lot of goal setting, a lot of changes came into my life. Then I had a major accident, or one of those life-changing events, in 2006. I woke up and the right side of my brain had gone over to the left side, and I could only remember everything in reverse, such as the alphabet, which is ZYXWUTSRQQMJKIHFADCBI, which is the alphabet backwards. And I had to relearn my children's names, their birthdays, what they wanted. And by that stage, I'd written a book that was looking to get published. I'd had an agent at that stage, and I went through a major personality change because everything had been reversed. Everything.
So did this happen, did you say, in 2006?
No, that was in 2010.
Oh, okay, good.
2010, when I had the accident, or whatever it was called, the counsellor I was seeing thought I'd had a major stroke because I'd literally had a different personality. I developed huge problems sleeping. I had to relearn anything and everything. The position I was in, which I was getting into quite a comfortable position. My life had come together. I'd been working in disability services for a few years. I was getting some opportunities. Financial institutions such as banks just loved me. I'd go in there and they'll say, "Mr. Raff, what would you like today? Just tell us and we'll just essentially write something out to you." And I had this accident, and then I couldn't pay any money back because it didn't occur to me. I thought they were just being friendly. I mean, it's all very funny. And so everything I had, everything got taken away. I ended up living in community housing. I was sleeping on a concrete floor, and that was where I really made that decision. I couldn't go back to working in disability services as with the one-on-one staff because I'd lost the people skills to do it. And it was about reconnecting the community. I started with creativity, got involved with Wild at Heart Community Arts, a songwriting group. I knew Phil Hoitzenroder, who's now got an Order of Australia, and he remembered me and he asked me to help mentoring people to write songs. It's a good start. I mean, I hadn't been involved with music for a long time. I write extremely well. The problem with this is I was asked to fix songs. People would give me their lyrics. I would fix them okay. And I strongly suggest people never do this to people when you're working with someone. You don't turn around and say, I will rewrite it for you on the spot and I'm not going to ask for your input. Not a good way of doing it. And I explained this to Phil and he said, give it a go. And it ended like I said it was going to end in disaster. But it actually was a bit more insight. In 2012, I found out that I did have Asperger's syndrome. I'd suspected this from about 30-odd years previously, 40 years as a teenager. I saw a big article, identified as having autism or Asperger's syndrome. It made sense to me.
Sorry, I'd want to stop you there, Raf. Did you only find out in 2012 that you are autistic or have Asperger's?
I found out formally in 2012.
Sorry, I actually didn't. I must have missed that bit of your bio in the long bit I've known you. I just, I think I thought you had known that much longer or you'd had a diagnosis. Can I take you back? Because I want to
Sure.
Just go back to, well, when I first met you in 2006 and you hadn't considered yourself a leader, but did you consider yourself as having disability?
Yeah, it's that I had a disability. I was on a disability support pension.
Yeah, but you didn't identify as autistic at that point, though.
I didn't identify as autistic. I'd never gone through and got an assessment for autism. I'd seen a lot of counsellors, a lot of psychologists, a lot of psychiatrists over a long, extended period of time.
So your disability was some sort of psychosocial thing at that time. That's how it had been labelled.
I think that would be the kindest way to do it is describe it. That's on how it had been medically labelled.
Absolutely.
At that point. And that I actually want to clarify this one too, that as a teenager, I hated bread. I was always asking to see an allergy specialist. It does cause behaviour problems when I have particular foods. And from the time I was about 12 or 13 and I was seeing doctors and people like this, that I always asked for an assessment to see an allergy specialist, and it always been refused over 30 years by over 100 health professionals. People wonder why I hate health professionals. I do have food allergies. It was picked up in 2009 by an allergy specialist, and we went through the elimination diet, and I came much easier to be around because...
Yes. Allergies make a really big difference to your life. I'm really sorry that was denied to you for so long. But I am sitting here in a bit of wonder. I did know this about you, but I'm also just so sad, but also baffled that no one thought to formally give you an autism diagnosis or do that assessment until 2012 because you are, so autistic.
Oh, look, it's like it's kind of like, this sounds like I'm being very difficult and pedantic here. As the bottom line is, I identify with Asperger's syndrome as opposed to autistic because I am the exception for people that are autistic. In my opinion, I am an extrovert. I get on extremely well with people. I have very far out thinking. And whereas a lot of people that are autistic are introverts, quiet, withdraw. I tend to get in the middle, and the world does revolve around what I am doing, not much what other things. And I do have the Aspie temper.
Okay, well, I will sort of disagree with you because I actually think that whilst you are incredibly unique and yourself, there's actually heaps of extroverted autistic and Asperger's people around, but they probably, like you, haven't ever been able to get a formal diagnosis.
Look, I'm happy to roll with that one. Is that I've met a lot of people that are autistic. Most of them have been introverts when they've been formally assessed. I have not met too many people that are extroverts that have been formally assessed with Asperger's syndrome or identify with having Asperger's syndrome.
You should go on YouTube, by the way. On YouTube, there are so many extroverted Aspies out there making YouTubes about themselves.
Oh, well, actually, in 2009, I actually put that on, I think it was Facebook, is that I really do think there should be a movie about my life, and someone hacked into my computer, and there actually was for a while. I mean, that's just begging for it.
So I want to now go back to your story. I just wanted to sort of, because I, that's when I met you, was in 2006. And so my story with you begins there. But obviously your story started long before me and continued after that as well. Do you want to continue from where I interrupted? Or
well, you didn't actually interrupt. Is that you are the interviewer, Larissa? My job is to answer the questions to the best of my ability.
True.
If you to break it up into segments which people might be able to relate to, because I can talk for the full hour without getting another question, and that's not good for anyone. So I got involved with songwriting. People liked the way that I wrote, and that provided a really good outlet for me from a creative perspective, because I then had a platform or a forum to express myself, to connect with others. And one of the things which we might touch on with the interview, I wrote Attitude Princess back then. That was recorded. Attitude Princess the song was picked up by a number of film festivals, and that's been quite interesting what people's reactions have been to it. That's why I'd like to revisit that later on. I then saw that Writers Victoria, the Emerging Writers competition was on. I entered that, became a finalist in the Emerging Writers Festival. That led, and because I was writing, that led to me saying, if I'm going to write, I'd like to take my own pictures rather than try to actually find pictures I could use. So I picked up photography. I did a lot of photography as a teenager, or not as a teenager, as a young adult, when I was younger anyway. At the time I was about 13, 14, which is when my parents split up. I did a lot of photography. One of the teachers I had back in grade 6 thought that I was encouraged to pursue a career around photography. That was when I was about 12 or 13, which is, I never did it. But when I started writing, I got my first camera about a year or so later and went back to it and started to learn that. I got involved with Arts Access Victoria. I was involved with RAG Theatre, which is community theatre. And that's where you and me basically semi-connected on a more formal basis, because Larissa, you're at Arts Access Victoria, we're at a meeting and we reconnected then, and our paths started to cross a lot more at that stage.
We did. That's true.
And that
yes. I'm going to say you're just really good, something that you're really good at actually linking in with different organisations and reaching, I mean, that's the extrovert in you, I suppose, connecting in to different orgs, testing them out, see how they work, see if they're a good fit for you. They're not, moving on. It's admirable.
Well, look, and part of that was that I really did not know what I actually wanted to do after I had the accident. To me, I liken it to being born. I had no resources. I had no parents. I had no role models to work out what was actually right. And it was about putting my foot in the water or an ocean and testing things out. And with creativity, people seemed to think I was good at it. And I didn't get formally trained by people. Like the writing was something which I write by intuition. I use my senses, which is the taste, the sense, the smell, what I hear, and lastly, what I see. I've never understood people who could not write that way. I've never looked at a page and had something called writer's block, because I've always got something to say. And I've never had that problem with it. And with the music, writing song lyrics was a way to connect with others, to make sense out of my world. some people actually really love, a lot of people have loved what I've written about. Other people have actually hated the lyrics and loved the style of it. And what I found by linking in with places like ArtsX Victoria comes readily to mind. There was Wild at Heart Community Arts. I did some things with Melbourne Fringe Festival. There was Rag Theatre. There was a film series called Into the Limelight. I got involved with all these things, and with all of them, there was someone who was very, very good at what they did, who took a personal interest in what I was doing, and I got informal, what I would call mentoring or assistance, more so than people who just went to the organisations and said, I'm here to do one thing. I made friends with people that were very good at, I became friends with them, but they were very good at what they did, like with filmmaking through Into the Limelight. That's an interesting, at that stage, I was doing a writing course, and I got a phone call 7 o'clock, I think it was a Tuesday morning, from Phil Heitzingrider from Wild Heart Community Arts, and said, Raf, we really would like you. You're the only person that can work with this particular director without a security check, police check, and an actual interview. We're the only person we can trust actually step up from this. And I thought, gee, that's a bit strange. I've never done filmmaking before. And it was 7 o'clock in the morning. Keep it in mind, I hadn't had breakfast, so I abused the hell out of him, as I do. And then I had a shower, had breakfast, and rang him back and said, yes, I will do it. And he gave the person a call, and it was quite okay. And that lady was a person called Sarah Jane Woolahan, and one of the videos she's done was called Sedan Zion Dane. And at that stage, it had 5 million views on YouTube. She was kind of very good at what she did, and she's now doing a PhD or lecturing how to make films. I think it's at RMIT. It was a very good person to learn a little bit how to work with people and get some insight. And she gave me the practical stuff of how to work with others, settle down, work around them, and do the best with what you've got. And this is a message for anyone in the world, they're creative, especially if you've got a disability. The best equipment you have is the equipment you have with you, not that camera you have at home, that microphone you actually have at home. The best equipment is what you've got, and you work with that, do the best you can with it. That was really, really good for me.
Yeah. I guess it's a good attitude to life as well. Not just arts practice, is work with what you've got instead of wanting what you haven't or what is somewhere down the road. But having said that, goals is something that is really important to you. In fact, that's my first memory of you actually being very impressed with the amount of processes you had around setting goals. So you would like have goals for the day, goals for the week, goals for the month, goals for the year. I learned a lot from you about that. And I guess it's a balance between having goals around what you want to achieve and then also working with what you've got today. And
yeah, look,
both those.
That's a really, really good point, because that's the reason how you and me met. That was back in Leadership Plus back in 2006. And how Leadership Plus was conducted, I'd done a lot of reading, and it was all about the self-help books, and a lot of them, and what worked for me and what didn't work for me. Yeah. And part of this was that in life, to me, it was about building a legacy. And it's a lot easier to build some type of legacy if I had it written down and I knew what I actually wanted to achieve. But goal setting is one of those difficult things, is that it can be very, very difficult, especially when people start off with it. And because we talked about it at the course Leadership Plus in 2006, the facilitators, I think it was Stephen Gianni, and I think it was Suzanne Teese, Tanya Askey, and I can't think of the guy's name. I think it was a bloke, Anthony, came in, and he was doing the formal accreditation, recognised that I might have some insight into goal setting and how to unpack it to make it work so people could complete the academic qualifications. So here I was with no qualifications other than I'd read the books and I'd put them into my life. And I was talking about from goal setting, if I wrote down what the big goal is for 1 year and I wrote it down, I would then write a plan out for each of the goals, which was about 10 for each year. And they're in descending order. The first goal, the most important thing to focus on, was the big goal to get done. That made life easy, and I'd work my way down that list. And if it was broken down to monthly little parts of what I could do, weekly parts what I could do, and having a daily routine, it made my life a lot easier because it kept me focused. And one of the things I recall, Larissa, I believe that goal setting actually did assist you to a big extent, because until that point, that made sense why to do it like that. It usually, instead of trying to do everything that was possible.
Yeah.
And some of the goals were pretty far out there with it. And to some extent, I've done some of those. I've tried to keep that into my life, of having some type of routine into my life. And it's one thing for people to say that with creativity, well, there's 24 hours a day, so I can do creative things 24/7. But in the words of a much wiser person than who's, again, they took me under their wing, they actually said, well, if you want to be creative, you do it an apprenticeship or a traineeship and a degree, just in case the world doesn't work out from creative, and the world might be ready for a genius like yourself who will be discovered and become famous and rich if that's what you happen to want. It's just in case it doesn't work out, the world is not ready, so you've got a fallback position. And my fallback position was always being creativity, is to reinvent what I was doing and come what I consider fairly good at a lot of areas, rather than being an expert in one area. And I think this goes back to having Asperger's syndrome, and I knew this was going to happen. My phone would go off.
Well, I can jump in there whilst you're doing that and say, I thought you were going to talk about how creativity is, I think I was just imposing upon you my own thoughts, but to be creative often requires structure. So you mentioned about routine, and I too think that having routine and structure is really sort of important framework for certain people like you and me to then, launch off and be creative, having a sort of a structure.
Yeah, well, look, I'm happy to roll with that one too, is that this is something which we're going to start with, let's say, writing, for example. That was what my first arts discipline was writing. I have got no idea why, if I ever went to a writing group, they would insist that you're supposed to do a warm-up exercise. Either I'm a writer or I'm not a writer. And the point is that I would have already done a warm-up exercise at home before I start, because I'll get up start writing. This is not, I don't think it's rocket science. I've never understood going to let's say, a gym without doing, and I've done a lot of gym work for a long time. I've never understood going to a gym and not actually stretching properly first. I've never needed an instructor there to say you need to actually stretch there, because I would like to stretch first. I've never understood you need to warm up. And it all had to do with that was always the starting point of it. And that made sense for me to actually just do it. And I got very, very frustrated with groups that tried to say, well, you need to do it again. And I actually told, when I was doing, let's say, with the acting in amateur theatre, we want you to do a warm-up. Then you want you to sit there but they were doing yoga to energize me. So I was getting triple energized, and they wondered why I was taking off at 100,000 miles per second, because it just reset, because I'd already done the warm-up about 5 or 6 hours before. It was insanity.
I guess that shows one, that everyone is different, and that some people need warm-up, some people have already done their warm-up, some people don't need one. And I guess it shows the how we need to be more flexible with each other, and also listen to each other when somebody says, no, this is the way that I need to do it. Of course, some people do need more direction. So it is tricky trying to balance all that, isn't it?
Look, is that that's something I've actually learnt from you, Larissa, is that I believe that you've actually got much better people skills in accommodating what people can do than I actually do. I think that you've actually got better people skills with that kind of thing, but I think I've got a pretty good idea about overall pictures of what needs to be done, and it tends to actually work well, but every person is actually very, very different. And again, one of the things that I found through my creativity journey, I would not imagine that it's one which would work for other people. Part of it is that I do have very good interpersonal skills face-to-face most of the time. I've always been able to find, like, how do you gain experience? Well, the best way for me to gain experience was to find other people's projects to work on with them about what was important to them, but about from people who knew what they were doing, not what I thought I had the latest and greatest brilliant idea that was going to get discovered. Because there's a huge disparity in, I believe there's a huge disparity in people's maybe abilities, thoughts, ideas. I might want to make a film. Now, if I knocked on Steven Spielberg's personal home and said, look, I want to make films, sort of like, can you be my partner for my project? Look, Steven Spielberg might be a hell of a nice guy and say, yeah, sure, I'll do this. It doesn't tend to work like that in real life. I always found people who had projects, I learned from them. Yeah. And I tried to put it into life, and I was able to contribute in other ways, which they went out to do. Like, I'm very good at connecting people in their projects. And it comes back.
Take a break here, because I'm not quite sure where we're headed. And I think now might be a good time to actually look at one of your little videos that you've made.
Yeah, would you like me to introduce it?
That sounds like a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, because this is a video which I did. It happened post-COVID. Oh, well, when I say post-COVID, post-2020, once COVID came, because my directions changed. This one is called Middle-Aged Punk. You can make up your mind whether it's fact or fiction. I hope you enjoy it and relate to it. This is Middle-Aged Punk by the...
I've been cruising in my Chevy, searching for a place where I belong, but I've never been able to find anywhere that I can call home. And there's nothing worse than a cynical middle-aged punk who discarded their talent as junk, like what you see on the side of a road. But another person's trash is always somebody else's treasure. It's changed from a burden to a gift giving others pleasure. Once I reinvented my soul. Well, I've slept next to rivers where the ground was my bed, a stone for my pillow with a dark sky of my head, when I was living rough, picking up cigarette butts when times were tough. And then one day I knew something has got to change. And there's nothing worse than a cynical middle-aged punk who discarded their talent as junk, like what you see on the side of a road. But another person's trash is always somebody else's treasure. It's changed from a burden to a gift giving others pleasure. Once I reinvented my soul. Now I always have a smile on my face, but my kids don't remember me since the day I vanished without a trace, as booze took me to another place when I didn't know what was really important. And there's nothing worse than a cynical middle-aged punk who discarded their talent as junk, like what you see on the side of a road. But another person's trash is always somebody else's treasure. It's changed from a burden to a gift giving others pleasure. Once I reinvented myself. Every day when I wake up, I'm haunted by the sound of their voices, asking me to take them to the park as real dads do. I wish I'd made better choices as I remember their voices, and it's all the pain in my head from the history of the past, and there's nothing anyone can do. And there's nothing worse than a cynical middle-aged punk who discarded their talent as junk, like what you see on the side of a road. But another person's trash is always somebody else's treasure. It's changed from a burden to a gift giving others pleasure. Once I reinvented myself. And there's nothing worse than a cynical middle-aged punk who discarded their talent as junk, like what you see on the side of a road. But another person's trash is always someone else's treasure. It's changed from a burden to a gift giving others pleasure. Once I reinvented myself.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I know what that one means. That's a bit of Auslan there for applause. Thank you very much.
It's pretty amazing when you
Breaking news. Buskers will soon be allowed
I'm so
to
sorry.
return to the city of Kingston.
I still want to.
I am the Beurologist.
Maybe you just hit mute there,
Social
Julie.
distance
Sorry.
restrictions. I found out I came a finalist in the city of Kingston optical competition.
Yeah, I think it just went to the second video. Okay, sorry about that.
Yeah, well, look, that was a bit interesting there. I mean, kind of like, thank you very much for YouTube for deciding to continue the Beurologist production, making a free advert for me.
Yeah, so what I was about to say is that what the piece that we saw, it sort of parallels disability, and you know how people, well, the ableist society consider like at times people with disability as disrespected. Yes, so that's what I took away from that video. What about you, Larissa?
I think Raf probably will want to answer that.
I'm not too sure. Can you just repeat the question there, please?
So I found there was a parallel in society with your reference to junk, and you know, and like junk is someone else's treasure, and there's a lot of parallels. How some ableist people in society view people with disabilities.
In the sense that we disabled people are often not respected and are seen as junk.
Yeah.
And yet we know within the disability community that that disabled people can bring many things to great things. Sorry, I'm distracted by yet another cat.
Noticed.
Yeah. What made me think about too was, you know, I know a bit about you, Raf, and I know that you've had some big challenges. I mean, we've all had challenges, but you seem to have, you know, had more than your fair share. And you know, living through periods of homelessness in your life and estrangement from those that you love, and And also, I know that a huge achievement of yours has actually been sober. Are you okay to share a bit about that now?
Yeah, look, I think it's actually of interest to other people, this one. I mean, it's no secret with me is that kind of like I started drinking when I was 18. By the time I was 20, I knew I had a huge problem with alcohol. I could never get enough of it. And as it relates to allergies, I actually am allergic to yeast. I don't process sugar particularly well. Most beer has got gluten on it, which I don't process particularly well. Most spirits and wine are high in saliciates or very high in saliciates, which can be learned. Well, it was disproven from a medical perspective that you ran into learning difficulties, dyslexia, memory problems, a lot of other things. I was always in a blackout. I knew but what would happen is that I could never stop drinking once I started drinking. And so I saw this endless role of more health professionals from the time I was 18 for quite a long, long time. I was looking for a way to stop drinking, not to control it. And there's a big difference for it. And there was very little, no point. A counsellor tried to unpack my background and say, this is the reason that you drank. I had a lot of challenges growing up, and it's not about minimising other ones. There was a lot of difficulties growing up for a lot of reasons, but it was not related to I drank to either cover up memories or suppress them or to deal with a coping mechanism and to count drinks or to tell the time or do these social situations. It was once I started, I could never stop drinking. And the only solution was that I wanted to stop drinking. And I don't mind other people drinking around me. I think it's great that they do, provided it's not me. And the health professionals, if you don't get it, are the top of the most hated profession that I have ever come across. And I actually have zero zilch time with them. But nonetheless, I'm glad that they exist for people who want to go there. And so that's where a lot of my story is that there was too many things that actually happened when I was actually drinking. And it wasn't about the behaviour or the consequences. It was that I knew that I was out of control when I was drinking, and I was always drunk. And so when I stopped drinking, it was the behaviours which were problems or kind of like described as an oppositional defiance disorder. They don't usually happen as much when I don't drink. And it's a huge difference between the two. And they were more concerned about me smoking as well. Like when I was drinking, I was having 30 standard drinks a day, 70 to 100 cigarettes a day, 3 or 4 hours sleep each night, sleeping with anyone and everything. I had the rock god lifestyle down pat, and that's what it was like. And I had all these adventures for a long, long period of time, and I've stopped drinking now. I haven't drunk for 23 years. And those very things which actually happened, it means I've got interesting stories to tell about my past, and I usually put them in a way that it's a mixture of facts and fiction, and it's up to people to work out what was the fact and what is the fiction. And some of the best pieces I've ever performed, people said to me, you are so brave telling us about this. And I can assure you there was not a word of truth in it. And some of the ones which I've written, which were completely true, it couldn't have happened the way you described it. And that's where the big thing was. I wanted to stop drinking. I got to a 12-step organisation and they offered a solution, which was I wanted to stop drinking. I didn't want to control it. So that sort of made sense to me. And I'll finish the answer in round terms. One of my mates is a counsellor, or he's pretty, he knows a lot about mental health and all that sort of things. He said, Raf, knowing what you know now, what would you like a counsellor to say to you if you went to them to talk about how to stop drinking? And I said to him, they could tell me to get the F out of the office and not come back until I'd actually stopped. And he goes, that's a bit harsh. Don't you think they could help you? I said, no, because I would only see a counsellor if I had a problem, and I wouldn't see a counsellor if I didn't have a problem. And The only solution I was interested in would be I wanted to stop drinking. And if I could control the drinking, I wouldn't have a problem, so I wouldn't see them to start with. If that makes sense to anybody else, it might not.
It sort of makes sense. It also shows that for some of us, psychologists are pretty useless and don't actually have any answers. So why do we bother going seeing them in the first place? But society forces us to. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. Can I move on? I would like to talk to you about disability pride now. As our listeners will know, I do have a passion for disability pride because I see it as our best tool for dismantling ableism. But I know that you too have, learnt and grown from disability pride. And I'm really interested to find out what it meant for you to discover disability pride and what it does for you in your life today, or what were the impacts that it had when you first came across disability pride?
Well, I'd like to say that when I was growing up, I was just me. And whether it was, and to me, disability, is it another label or is it not a label? I don't know. I've identified as being me. And the fact that a medical profession labels a condition as a disability, I'm quite certain in my mind the health professionals would quite clearly make a better way of making mud pies other than using dirt and water. Seriously. And that's how I view disability pride, that because of things like disability pride, it actually is a way of maybe building a connection with other people. It's a way of building a community. It's a way of actually standing together. It's a way of making macro change. And to me, I believe that is actually important. Sometimes it's about breaking down the social stigma of having a disability. Sometimes it's not disclosing other people's disability, which I believe is relatively important, unless they've actually got permission from them. Like a couple of my friends, I like to think they're friends like Larissa, kind of like if somebody says, I will say there is a disability there, and I say that with a couple of my other friends, they're confident in their ability about this is disability pride, this is who we are, and this is what we actually do. Like, for example, the disability pride mural, the original disability pride mural, which is in 2017, which we put up in Footscray, that was an historical moment that people will come together. And I was actually very surprised, pleasantly surprised, when I did get the invitation from yourself, Larissa, who you invited me to submit a piece into it. And I thought, gee, that's a bit strange, but I know you, and I'm sure you had my best interest in heart. So I put it actually in there. And one of the things about disability pride, that there was a sense of warmth there, people walking together. And I'll never forget this. And this is what was so heartbreaking when it was wrongfully removed. I remember those 3 days before it actually opened in 2017. There was yourself, I think it was Hannah, and myself. We had no money, no resources. It was 40-degree days, no access to a bathroom, no fluids, no food, and we got it done. And that's what I remember about it, that there was no resources, and we got through and showed it could be done. And then it was removed on International Day of Disability wrongfully. And this is where I think Larissa and myself might have very, very different conflicting memories about it. I would actually argue, with hindsight, that wrongful removal was the best thing that ever happened, despite the huge emotional cost it took on, I think it was yourself, myself, and everybody involved with it, because it then became a worldwide issue. The post went viral. It became important in reclaiming the space and setting a standard. And I would actually argue very fervently that when the mural Disability Pride went back up, that was the defining moment of the disability movement in Australia, which is only very young. It's only 50 years old, where we actually stood together as a group and said, we are not going to be pushed around. We're going to claim that space. And you are going to know and acknowledge this is what's been done. That was disability pride. Instead of actually somebody saying, your disability is better than mine, my disability is worse than yours, and getting into a competition about it. And that meant that it became a lot more visible, it became a lot more acceptable, it came on the agenda, and it started to come to people's thinking. But it took a total catastrophe, such as removing disability pride, the original mural, for that to happen. And I'm sure that up here, I'm certain that it deeply affected, I think it was Larissa's health, it deeply affected my health at a big level too. And it took a huge toll on the people about it, but it got done.
Yeah.
And that was really, really important. It got done and it took place, and people start to work out it is not on how other people view disability. It's about taking pride on who we are, not having other people to try to fix us to what they want us to be.
Yeah, tapping into that social model idea that we don't need to be fixed, we need to be respected, and we deserve human rights like everyone else. Thanks for sharing all that, Raf. I wasn't trying to get you to do that with my question, but thanks for that. It's really interesting for me to hear the story outside of my own head of that mural. And I agree with you that it certainly brought disability pride into greater awareness in the mainstream by that terrible action of it being destroyed after it had only been up for a week. But yes, we are still, both of us, I think, living with the emotional toll of that experience, but each year it gets a bit less. And I guess it points to, for me, that disability pride, a lot of the practice of disability pride is about resisting ableism. So when I speak up about the way somebody else is being treated, or maybe, the lack of, Auslan interpreters at an event that's about deafness, deaf culture, something ridiculous, which happens all the time. And when you speak up about that, then that's when I'm practicing disability pride. And I've come to understand that disability pride is less about rainbows and balloons and saying how great I am. It's more about standing strong and resisting, standing strong and claiming our rights, and resisting when they are withdrawn.
Well, it's like, but that brings up to, I think, at least the next point about access and inclusion. And I've got some very controversial thoughts about that one too. It's like I remember going to the first State of the Deaf Arts Expo, and that was back in 2019. I remember going to that is the deaf culture and the deaf community and hard of hearing community. They've got a much better idea of what access and inclusion means, and they get on and they do it, and they make the access there for people who identify as being part of the hearing community, but the hearing community does not reciprocate. That is something, a big lesson, which I think the hearing community can take on board. But I'm actually, like I said, I've got challenging views on this one. For example, writing an image description. Now, one of the things I've learned about access and inclusion is only required at the level of whom the intended audience is. It is not required across the board. On my social media, I do not do image descriptions for my personal social media. It is there. And I remember, I think it was Kristen Emerson, he did he had an exhibition, it was in Melbourne Fringe, it's a blind photographer, and he actually said that people could always download the picture, use the zoom function on it to blow it up to whatever size they wanted to, and that's on how he originally learned about gardening and things like that. That's on how he actually did it. And from an ableistic point of view, I think it's extremely disrespectful. The person writes an image description and it's a robot voice or a computer-generated voice that gives it. There's no personal touch there whatsoever. I totally disagree with that. I believe it should be actually done as some type of link where the person who's the artist who took the photo or the picture describes it. To me, that is inclusive. To me, putting it right down there, it doesn't sit well with me, and I'm quite happy with that.
Sure. Although I guess that it's always important. Two things. One, access is can never be, nothing can ever be fully accessible. Access are always competing because we're all really, really different. So there's no one way to create access. It's more about, for me, it's more about the attitude, or like, for example, Mia Mingus in the United States, a disability activist, she says access is love. And so for me, more access is around having a conversation with the people around you to find out what they need. And I can't speak to what you've just said because I am not blind, and so I don't use image descriptions, but I have some blind friends who will say, yeah, they're really important, and others will go, no, they're not. So I guess there's no blanket sort of statement around access. It's always changing and depending on who's in the room.
Yep, certainly. And like, even look in the case of, let's say, subtitles or providing a transcript, something which I've noticed from communicating with members of the deaf and the hard of community, I think I love them as people. Using the very shapes, colours, images is very, very important to them if it's a text or a message. Yet a lot of the people, however, in the hearing community, when they teach it, if you're putting a little image in there, you're actually saying, they claim it's childish language. And I'm just thinking, this is why I'm not interested in that formal cultivation of it, of trying to educate the educators, because it doesn't make any actual sense to me. And it's like if they're getting paid to teach, then they can pay me to go to their board and educate them about it. But I'm not sitting down with them. If one person's getting paid at the table, everyone's getting paid for sharing their own expertise with it, because that is about access, inclusion, love, equity. Everybody is actually more or less equal and have got things to actually offer there. And to me, that's more reasonable than trying to sit down, which is just because I know how to do something, it doesn't mean I'm actually going to do it.
I'm going to move us along at this point because I know that we're running out of time. Julie might be able to give us a time check on how long we've got.
2 minutes.
Only 2 minutes. Well, we might need to take a little bit longer for that because I have
COVID.
Yeah, I want to talk about COVID because I feel like we've been through so much, and disabled people have particularly faced so much ableism that came along with COVID and so many things. And a lot of us are still isolating. A lot of us are still locked up. A lot of us are still struggling with the trauma of what's happened. And yet we're not talking about it very much, are we? There's this pressure to just move on and pretend it didn't happen. And I was reflecting on how many people we've interviewed where we haven't talked about COVID yet. I know that you've had a really hard time during COVID and that you've been quite open about it. Do you have any thoughts that you can briefly share now?
Oh, look, I could actually spend a whole hour talking about this. I know, but I won't be allowed. I mean, I could, but I'm not going to. Look, I had COVID twice. That I think it was the first time. The advice I got from a doctor was when I was getting really, really sick. We need you to get an urgent test for COVID, but you can't catch public transport and you can't catch a taxi. We want you to walk to a hospital to get it done. It was 6.5 kilometres. I had COVID and I walked 6.5 k's with it, stood in a queue with people all around me, and I was coughing, spluttering everywhere. I was trying to give people as much distance as I could. I was sick. And that was an experience of COVID. And I don't know how many people I gave it to down there, but I was in that queue for 4.5 hours. And then I had to walk another 6.5 k's back home. I mean, what were they thinking?
They weren't thinking at all, because I do remember having the same problem with them telling me I couldn't catch public transport, and it took me a very long time to get home from Laverton because I took them literally. The next time I realised that, you know, they weren't actually, who knows? I don't think anybody knew. I'm really sorry you went through that.
And like there was the experience like trying to get my mental health got totally destroyed with COVID, is that by I think it was September 2021, I knew my mental health was gone. I knew I had to take a break. I reached out for help. I was suicidal. I was walking down next to a railway line thinking, do I start Googling when the trains are going to come past? Eventually I got into a counsellor, and we all know how much I hate health professionals. I do not need somebody sitting there. And they were like, I didn't put them in hospital. I made it really easy for them after came to them assessing. I said, don't bother with a second session. You don't have enough life experience and you don't know what you're talking about, and you're going to discard it because it doesn't work like that with me. I need to connect with people. Like another one, the whole of COVID, I had a major shoulder injury, which I then acquired a physical disability. I had 35 breaks plus in my right arm, and they're trying to do assessments over a Zoom meeting. Well, good on them for having a crack at it, but I couldn't exercise any of the specialists that I needed to see. I mean, give me a break. Is that, I mean, Triage did describe it as one of the worst shoulder injuries they had ever seen in their practice. All the doctors described it as the worst because I'd actually had 4 breaks in my elbow, 25 breaks up the humerus, which is the big bone up here, snapped the humerus off my collarbone, snapped it through, so I had floating bones, 4 breaks at the back of it, and I tore everything, both sides of my shoulder. It was not a good situation, and I couldn't actually exercise medical assistance for it. The one about isolation, this is a big one for it. Choose one person. I've got kids. They all live at different locations. I was supposed to choose one of my children to see during it. I did it the first time it happened, and I thought, I can't do this to the other kids. So I chose to stay isolated. Suddenly all my reasons to be had been taken away. Is that I couldn't access a gym. The gym I was going to had 2,000 square metres. Their membership had basically been down to about half of it. If you went to the gym there, you'd have about 100 square metres, but apparently it was a dangerous place for me to be. So I couldn't do my rehab properly the way it could have been done. It gave me an outlet, and the anger started to build up. The frustrations, my communication started to go through, and this is the reality of it. And at the same time, I'm trying to hold a voice, do a few other things in the community. I lost friends during COVID. Some of them committed suicide. This is the reality of it. I lost friends in the disability community, and one of the reasons was I had very strong stance on that one, that from a mental health point of view, I couldn't do another lockdown. And I had people telling me, if you love me as a friend, supporters, stand with us. I would have blown my brains out. This is what it was at. And here we are 2 years into the pathway out of COVID. And it's only now that my mental health is somewhat a little bit better than what it was. And it's taking a huge thing. I'll finish and close up my answer on this one. From a creativity point of view, in 2020, I was supposed to have a solo photo exhibition. There was a lot of stuff that I was going to be involved with Arts Ex Victoria. That was all cancelled. Mojo Film Festival with Heidi Everett, that was going to be the opening headline act of Acme Cinema opening up. That was cancelled. The stuff with, I think it was Theatre Network Australia, that all got cancelled. Everything was actually cancelled. And so here I was, and that led to me doing the song lyrics again. And I think to sum it up, in the song, I Can't Do Another Lockdown, it's got the lyrics, and I'm sitting on and I've counted all the pebbles on my balcony looking for something to do. And I reckon that's a pretty some situation. And my view on it is that with COVID and the lockdowns, everyone works out what's actually right for them. It's about respecting what other people's choices are and respecting my choices are. And I don't believe there's an easy answer for it.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, there isn't an easy answer, and I still feel like the path forward, recovering or trying to gain back our mental health and our physical health, is still a really slow process. And unfortunately, that's the healthcare system, which is, collapsing, which is really not great, even though we keep pretending it is, but it's not. I guess I don't have any answers. I guess we need to make sure we keep coming together and speaking to each other. But that is easier said than done, because, as you know, Raf, I have not been connected and I haven't reached out to many people. I feel like we're all babies learning again. But thank you for sharing, and I'm really sorry that you've gone through so much during these last few years.
Oh, look, and kind of like everyone's got their own stories to share about it. It's not kind of like completely about me. Like, one of the things I did was in 2021, I basically stepped away from social media.
Yes.
That was a good decision, what I actually made for myself.
And have you stepped in?
What's that?
Have you stepped back in?
I've just got my toes in there, because basically I don't feel like having arguments with people. If you're going to argue on my page, you will be wrong by the time I've finished. And you will be.
Right. You can do whatever you want on your page.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's the thing. That's the thing I'd like to actually finish up on. And the last thing I'm going to say is that I've had all my 5 COVID shots so far, because that's all that's actually available to me. And I'm taking the view that would give me the greatest amount of relative freedom, if freedom actually ever existed pre-COVID anyway. Thanks.
Okay. Well, on that note of freedom, if it even exists, thank you so much, Raf, for joining us today. And we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. I won't be, but there'll be a new guest and a new co-host, and Julie will be here to guide you through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you very much, Larissa, for inviting me to appear on Your Story, Your Voice. This is the Beurologist. Thank you.
Your life, your voice. That's fine.
Your life, your voice.
I mess up all the time.
I always get it the wrong way around, so I never say it anymore.
So thank you, Ralph. What a great enlightening story in life.
Oh, thank you very much.
So on that note, we'll just go to the end of the program.
Catch us on Your Life, Your Voice YouTube channel, live every Monday fortnight or on demand.
We would like your comments and suggestions on topics that you would like us to explore. Leave your comments on YouTube comments section.
Please feel free to email us on dndyourlifeyourvoice@gmail.com or contact us via the Migrant Resource Centre Northwest Region Inc. Phone number 1300 676 044. 1300 676 044.
Diversity in Disability is a project of the Migrant Resource Centre Northwest Region Incorporated, and would like to thank the management for funding this project, especially living through the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has been difficult for people with disabilities living in isolation.